Good morning. If you're rejoining us, welcome back. And if you're joining now at session 2, my name is Breda Kennedy and I work in the Authorizations and Reliefs Unit in Customs Division. And during this presentation, I'm going to give you a summary of the Customs Warehouse procedure and the end-use procedure. So I'll just start with the Customs Warehouse procedure. So what this authorisation allows is the economic operator to store goods in the approved warehouse with the payment of the duty and the VAT at importation suspended. So it means you can import your goods into your warehouse and you don't have to pay your duty when you're importing the goods. There's a few benefits. I suppose there's no interruption to the operator's cash flow. The duty will only be due when the goods are released from the customs warehouse. So operators can use a supply and demand system as goods are in situ and are ready to be dispatched. So there's no waiting on consignments to arrive. The duty and VAT is only charged on the consignments released to free circulation. So if the goods were re-exported back out of the customs warehouse to outside the EU, the duty and the VAT liability won't be payable. Goods stored in a customs warehouse can remain there indefinitely. There's no time limit. There would be an exception to this if it was goods in long-term storage that could cause harm to humans, animals or the environment, and in these cases customs can impose a time limit. It's possible to have a number of different premises on the one customs warehouse authorisation, and in this case the goods can move between the premises without a customs declaration. The goods are tracked through the stock records maintained by the company. So the conditions to be fulfilled, I just touch on the main conditions. The stock records of all goods declared to and discharged from the customs warehouse procedure must be kept and made available to revenue. And no processing can be carried out under the customs warehouse procedure. Usual forms of handling is the only activity allowed, and this could include dividing bulk consignments into smaller packages, or removing the original packaging and replacing it, or carrying out works just to keep the goods in the same condition. Security is also required, but I'll talk about that later in the presentation. If I could just remind you, if you want to submit any questions on this presentation, if you go to slido.com and enter the event code R184. So if you wish to submit an application for the customs warehouse procedure, you do it on the EU system, the customs decision system. And in this slide here, I've just shown the path of how to get to that. So if you go in under the customs traders and agents, and then there's processing goods, end use and warehousing. And there's a lot more information and detail on these procedures on that page. And if you follow, then you can get to the customs decision system, and that's where you will be. You'll then lead into this page, which is the entry to the trader portal. So when you log into the CDS, this is the first page you see, and there's 3 boxes just to be completed. The first one is domain, and that would be customs. The second one is you just pick Ireland as the country, and the third is you pick the type of actor, so it would be economic operator. So once you've done that, you'll be asked to download your ROS cert, and when your ROS cert is downloaded, you're in the area where you can actually select your end-use application and put it on the customs decision system. So when you've completed all of the information and submitted it, it's just at that stage then revenue can see your application on the customs decision system. There's various timelines for accepting applications and making decisions for customs special procedures. So for the customs warehouse procedure, we have 30 days to accept the completed application once it's submitted into customs. And then to make a decision on the completed application, there's 60 days allowable with the possibility of going to 90 days. But we don't always need that full time frame, but that's the time frame that's legislated by the EU that customs have to make the decision. So if I just talk you through the application process, once you've submitted your fully completed application and it has been accepted by customs, The next step is it's forwarded to the Customs Control Officer for the company to carry out the evaluation. So the evaluation would include a visit to the company, to the premises, and amongst other things, the control officer would check that there's verifiable and accurate stock control and accounting system, that the premises is suitable with regard to security, access arrangements and storage facilities. And I suppose at that stage as well, if you have any questions or you need clarification on the obligations under the authorisation, you can chat it out with your control officer. We find any of our companies that have authorisations for special procedures, they have a very positive working relationship with the control officer, and it is this control officer that would monitor and look after the authorisation through the lifetime of the authorisation, and it'd be your first point of contact as well on any issues. Security is required to cover the suspended duty, and it's in the form of a comprehensive guarantee. And the reference amount for the comprehensive guarantee would also be discussed during that meeting with the control officer. So in order to determine the reference amount for comprehensive guarantee for a customs warehouse, the control officer would examine the records to establish the total value of goods that can be placed under the customs warehouse procedure at a particular time based on the storage capacity and the highest duty rate. So if I just take a simple example, if the total value of the goods under the warehousing procedure was €1 million based on the storage capacity and the highest duty rate was 10%, the reference amount of the guarantee would be 100,000. The comprehensive guarantee, it can be in the form of a cash deposit or an undertaking from a financial institution, but I'll be going into more detail on the comprehensive guarantee during session 10 later on this evening. So the H2 is the name of the customs declaration that places the goods under the customs warehouse procedure, and this should be lodged to the automated import system, the AIS. The correct authorisation number, which would have been generated when you got your authorisation from the customs decision system, that needs to be quoted on your declaration, and the location identification number of the authorised premises needs to be included in the H2 declaration also. The goods stored under the customs warehouse procedure, they're discharged when they are either released to free circulation on the EU market, or they're declared to another customs special procedure or re-exported outside the EU. So that concludes the summary of the customs warehouse presentation. There's a lot more information on that procedure on the Revenue website, but I'll now move on to end use. So what end use is a preferential duty rate, and it's determined by tariff. So the classification code, the CN code for the goods, must have end use preference before an authorisation from end use can be granted. And the end use is based on the 10-digit CN code. So this slide just provides some examples of goods which have an end use preference rate. So for end use for aircraft parts, these parts must be capable of being fitted to the aircraft. The parts can't come in under end use if they need to be repaired before being fitted. Then the inward processing authorisation, which we spoke about in session 1, might be more appropriate. Another example then is parts for an oil rig, and discharge of these goods is when the goods are physically taken to the oil rig or the ship or helicopter, on the ship or helicopter and fitted to the rig. Then there's certain types of fish as well that also have end use on them. Simple operations like defrosting, packing, cutting on their own isn't enough. The fish must be processed further. So example would be defrosting and crumbing or processing into meals. Again, I won't go into too much detail on this slide because it's the same path as I mentioned earlier for submitting the application for the warehouse authorisation. So you go on the Revenue website, Customs Traders and Agents, and you can get to the CDS from there. And once you log into the CDS, again, I went through this earlier, you see that page and you answer the 3 questions, upload your ROS cert, and then you're in the area where you can actually select end use application and complete the details. And it's only when you've submitted that application, that's the first time Revenue will have sight of the application on the CDS. The time frame for end use is different to the customs warehouse procedure. So the EU legislates time frame for customs authorities to accept applications and make decisions. So once we've received a fully complete application with all the details we require, we have 30 days to accept that application. And when the completed application is accepted, we have 30 days to make a decision, and that can be extended to 60 days if required. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have to use that full timeline. If we can get through the process quicker, we definitely will. So once the completed application form is accepted by customs, the next step is it's forwarded to the control officer for the company, and the control officer will carry out an evaluation which would include a visit to the company. And during the visit, the control officer would check the operations being carried out, ensure goods are being put to the proper end use, and discuss the obligations of the authorisation. Some of the obligations would be there's a period of discharge agreed, and what this is the length of time from when the goods are imported until they are actually put to their proper end use. The control officer would also look at records, because under the end use authorisation, a document is required called a bill of discharge, and that should be submitted within an agreed time frame. And really the bill of discharge tracks the movement of the goods under the authorisation. It would show any of the declarations declaring the goods to the end use. There's a special procedure code for the end use, and then it would show as well them being discharged by being put to their proper end use. So security is required to cover the duties suspended on goods imported under end use, and it's in the form of a comprehensive guarantee. So the reference amount for the comprehensive guarantee would also be discussed during the control officer's visit. So as I said earlier, end use allows for a preferential rate of duty to be applied on the imported goods on condition that they're actually put to the proper end use, the specific end use agreed. So just to give an example, I suppose for the calculation of the guarantee, the non-preferential duty rate must be used. So this is the duty liability if the goods are not put to the end use. So if you bear with me, I'll just give an example. The CN code, that's the classification code, 8531109-510. That's fire alarms used in civil aircraft. So that could be imported with a 0% duty rate if the trader has an end-use authorisation. But if the trader doesn't have an end-use authorisation, they can't use this CN code, so they must use a CN code of the same number, but instead of 10 at the end, it's 90 at the end, which means other, and it means that there's a duty rate of 2.2%. And it's that 2.2% that's used when calculating the guarantee reference amount for an end-use authorisation. So the control officer would establish with the company the maximum value of goods under end use at a given point in time over the previous 12 months. And the highest stock record of these 12 months will determine the guarantee reference amount. So if you had maximum value of goods under end use at a given point in time of €50,000, the non-preferential duty rate is 2.2%, then the guarantee reference amount would be 1,100, just to give an example. And again, the comprehensive guarantee authorisation must be in place before any authorisation for end use can issue. And it can be in the form of a cash deposit or an undertaking from a financial institution. And I'll go into more detail on comprehensive guarantee during session 10. So to lodge, you need to lodge a H1 declaration to declare goods to end use and quote your authorisation number and also quote the correct procedure code. So if I could just summarise. Really, if you think customs warehousing or end use will apply, would be helpful to you from the 1st of January, you need to make your application now or make contact with Authorisations and Reliefs Unit. And thank you for your attention, and we'll go to the Q&A section now. Thank you.
That's great, Breda. Thanks very much. And welcome back, everybody. I think from the questions, we've quite a number of people who have been on the previous session. My apologies, I omitted to introduce myself at the first session, so my name is Linda Slattery and I head up the Brexit area for revenue. So again, welcome back to Rose, and Breda, thank you very much for that presentation. I understand there's still a couple of gremlins in the system, so again, my apologies for that. Our technical team are trying to sort those out. I can assure you that the recording output is intact, so the videos will be up. Yesterday's will be up today, today's will be up tomorrow. So the full uninterrupted presentation will be available live on the website. The live recording will be available on the website. So again, apologies for that. I think there's quite a number of questions that have come in. I think some people might find that there's some duplication between the two of those, but clearly we have designed these technical modules as standalone modules. So, but I think with the complexity of customs, it's probably no harm to hear some of these things more than once anyway. So some of the questions do link back in with the IP module that we've just covered, but I think it will be appropriate as people are trying to evaluate which is the better authorisation. Is it end use? Is it IP? We will pick up some of the questions from, not from the previous module, but that do relate to it. So there's the timing. How long does it take to secure an authorisation for customs warehousing and end use? And again, I think the timeframes are a little bit different for these ones. We did cover it earlier, but you might just kind of pick up some of that, Breda, in terms of the timeframes, please.
Well, as I said, the EU legislates the timeframes for the customs authorities to accept these applications and make decisions. So for the customs warehouse application, we have 30 days to accept the fully completed application. Once we have all the information in, customs have 30 days to accept it. And then the customs warehouse has a little bit longer in that we've 60 days to make a decision on it, with the possibility of going to 90 as well. So that's the customs warehousing. Now, as I said, we don't always need that length of time. We try to, process quicker. It can depend on various things like the records when the control officer visits, what's available, records, is there more work to be done to get everything in order to be able to, adhere to the obligations under the authorisation, and getting the comprehensive guarantee in place as well can be another issue that will affect. We can't issue the authorisation for the customs warehouse until the comprehensive guarantee is in place. And then I suppose the same things apply to end use, but the timeline is just a little bit different in that the customs authorities have 30 days to accept a fully completed application, and then we have 30 days to make a decision with the possibility of extending that to 60. So they're I suppose, the legislated timeframes, and as I said, we try to work within them or sooner if we can. But what I definitely advise is if you're making an application for these procedures, contact your financial institution immediately and let them know you're going to be in touch for a comprehensive guarantee, which, as you said, we'll be discussing in session 10 later today as well.
I think we mentioned it several times yesterday in terms of the countdown. We're now at 87 days. Neither from a business point of view or really from a revenue point of view, we really just don't want to find ourselves trying to process high numbers of these at the 11th hour. It really is. All the messages we were giving yesterday was inform yourself, find out what you need to be doing and start doing it now. And that obviously applies to all of the authorisation space as well. Rose, you might tell us, apart from, you might respond to this question, apart from aircraft, is there a definitive list outlining the specific purposes permitted under end use?
There's no definitive list. The end use is defined on the actual CN code itself. So if you classify your product, you then go in to the tariff to see is end use attached to that CN code. If it isn't, end use is not permitted. But if it is, then you can make your application. But there's no definitive list. It's individual on the CN code.
Okay, that brings us back then to the classification module, which is on at 11:15. So if you hadn't planned on registering for that, jump in with the registration now. It still is open. We don't have a limit on the number who participates, so certainly jump on that one now if you like. Rose, again, you might take this one. Can I have a location in Northern Ireland on my Irish warehousing authorisation?
Yes, you can. What you do is you will inform us that you have a premises in Northern Ireland that you want to add to your Irish authorisation. What we will do then is we will send that application to the UK for their approval. They have officially 30 days to reply to us. Once they give us approval for that premises in Northern Ireland, we will then add it to the Irish authorisation. The goods then can move from one premises to another with just the stock records. There is no additional declaration needed for the movement. Okay,
that's smoother.
Yes.
What about storing union and non-union goods in the same warehouse? Can they be stored together?
Storing them together, that's called common storage. And you fill in that box in your application form when you're sending in the application that you want to keep common goods in the warehouse with the non-union goods, so that we will approve initially that you can use common storage. You can put your Irish products in with your non-Irish product, with your UK products. your records will show the segregation that X amount is Irish, non-dutiable. The others will be duty suspended, and your supervising officer will know at all times then how much is dutiable goods and how much is common storage.
And I presume from that not only will the records show it, but from a physical sense, has there to be some kind of demarcation within the warehouse?
If at all possible, yes. But if you're storing liquids or something like that in a silo, well, then that's not possible. So segregation has to be there at all times, and that would be with records then in that case. Yeah.
Okay, that's clear. What will happen if I don't use the end-use goods?
If you've brought in goods if you've declared them to the end-use procedure and you don't use them, there's a couple of possible scenarios. First of all, if you do intend to use them, but your time frame, like your period of discharge, has run out, you can apply to ourselves, to revenue, for an extension of your period of discharge. 3 months, 6 months, you can use them then. If that's not the case, you can apply to us to re-export them. If you decide you brought in too much and you want to send some back, you must apply in advance. Re-exportation is not on the end use, so you must apply for it. And the last option is payment. You'll have to pay the duty.
Yeah. Breda, there's some here in terms of people who are new to the market if they have never imported or exported before, and would they still qualify for some of these authorisations?
Yeah, well, I suppose what we say is for the comprehensive guarantee, you have to be a regular user of the procedure or be competent in customs matters. So, I mean, the option there would be that, I mean, initially, if you haven't been doing this, you could employ a customs agent or maybe have a customs expert in-house, but it doesn't disqualify you from actually getting an authorisation like this. But it may be that you need somebody with the customs experience to initially get you up and running on this until you have a customs expert in-house to do it for you.
So not a disqualifying, but the barrier potentially that you would see is just in terms of expertise.
Yes.
And that's what businesses would have to overcome.
Yeah.
And it's helpful then to consider the second last module from yesterday evening that we did in terms of business supports that the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation delivered. And they spoke at length in terms of financial supports for building up your customs expertise within your company, the SkillsNet training, customs clearance, it's a free training module. So there are quite a number of supports in terms of helping businesses to try and fill that expertise gap.
Yeah.
That's important. So the answer to the question is yes. You will qualify even if you've never done this before. Rose, can goods imported from GB prior to the end of transition, prior to the 1st of January, can they be entered into a warehouse and subsequent to that, after the 1st of January, can they be moved into IP before being processed or exported to the UK?
Goods coming from GB beforehand are union goods, but if they're in the warehouse after the 1st of January, they will actually become non-union goods. So you can then put them into your IP because they are non-union goods.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, great. Somebody had asked about farmed fish on inward processing from the UK, and they were recommended that end use. Just wondering kind of what's the benefits of end use in that scenario?
Fish coming from GB after the 1st...
Sorry, I should add that the project is going back to, it's being exported to the UK.
After...
Yeah. The farmed fish on inward processing from the UK was recommended end use. How is this beneficial if I'm exporting the product back to the UK?
Coming in from the UK into Ireland, end use will be zero rated. You make your product, your fish, your meals. Going back, I'm not sure what duty rate will be. It's an import into the GB. It's an export from Ireland, but it's an import into GB, so I'm not sure.
It depends on what
it will
approach
depend.
The UK take.
Yes, it will.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I think for that kind of a question, again, it would be happy, I mean, if the preferential duties might be relevant.
Yes.
The second element is dependent on what the UK decide to do.
Yes.
And I think really the response to that is if there's follow-up questions, again, absolutely happy to take, from the Irish perspective, happy to take questions through the Brexit queries mailbox. And secondly, we would recommend that you continue to monitor the HMRC's website for what the UK government are determining will apply when you're bringing the goods back into the UK in that scenario. For goods that require a health certificate, animal products, can DAFM certify the goods held in the warehouse, which will then be exported to the UK or to a third country?
Well, our procedures don't take away the need for an agricultural certificate. So if the agriculture certificate is needed at import, it will still be needed. You know, using one of our procedures does not take away the necessity for the certificate.
Yeah. And again, I think the last module yesterday covered a really extensive presentation on the SPS, moving agricultural goods. So again, feel free to go back on that module or to raise a query with the Department of Agriculture. Can you operate a customs warehouse authorisation alongside an IP authorisation?
Yes, you can. It's actually very beneficial. If you're bulk buying something like that and you bring in all your product, if you're not ready to use the amount you've brought in, you can store them in the warehouse and then you can draw them down into your IP as you require them.
Okay.
If I could just add to that there, it means then with your inward processing that you're not eating into your period of discharge for inward processing because the goods are in storage, which has no limit, whereas you could be tied to your period of discharge once you start your processing. So at least if you can keep them in your warehouse procedure until you're pretty much ready to go, it's very beneficial.
I think that's a really important clarification because the sense I'm getting from a lot of the questions that are coming in is that people are trying to understand the processes, the timeframes and which apply best. You know, where are the pros and cons of applying for any of the, whichever of these authorisations and what applies best to their model in terms of how they're using the product.
We'd actually have a number of companies that are actually authorised for warehouse procedure and inward processing and use them in conjunction.
Okay, great. Breaking down bulk or repackaging goods, would this be IP procedure or better handled, this is linked to what we're saying, or better handled under customs warehouse procedure?
It would depend on the time limit. If you brought in a bulk consignment and you wanted to break them down, but you're waiting on purchasers, you're waiting for buyers, then you do that in a warehouse. Whereas if you want an IP, you bring it in, you're doing something maybe more detailed than just packaging or unpackaging, you could use the IP procedure for that.
Okay. And again, if that's a really specific, if somebody wants to tease that out a little bit further, they can follow that up directly. If your company is an AEO approved authorised economic operator, do you still need to provide guarantees under the IPOP or end use authorisations?
I can take that one if you want, Rose.
Thanks, Brenda.
Yeah, I will be going into further detail at session 10 on this. But if you're an AEO and you're importing goods to the special procedures, you have a waiver. Now, you still need to apply for comprehensive guarantee and get a comprehensive guarantee authorisation, but you won't need a cash deposit or a financial undertaking. So there's no requirement there, and it's a quicker process, so you have your waiver. The only thing to consider is the transit procedure. You can't put a cash deposit in place. It has to be comprehensive guarantee, or a financial undertaking, but you get a waiver being an AEO as well. The only one, if you're an AEO and you're applying for deferred payment, the comprehensive guarantee is a reduction to 30%. You don't get a full waiver there. So that's I suppose, the advantages of the AEO status and the comprehensive guarantee.
Okay, look, that's great. I mean, I think clearly there's definitely people, I think it strikes me that there's definitely people with some experience of this that are really trying to get into a little bit more granular detail, which is great from our point of view in terms of seeing where people might be at, where businesses might be at with their preparations. It's great to see that people are really getting into this kind of granular detail. Very helpful, I think, Breda, in terms of how you've gone through the presentations, given that kind of really clear approach to what the steps are. As we said, the presentations will be available, really significant broad information on the website to follow that through as well, with the other follow-up contacts. So I think that's been really helpful to bring everybody through those steps. So again, I'd like to thank Breda and Rose for their contributions on this panel discussion. The next session is coming up at 10:30 and we are looking at temporary admissions and release. Apologies there. That's great. Thanks very much.